The first time I understood what it meant to be unwanted, I was standing in the center of our pack's gathering circle, rain soaking through my thin cotton dress, my bare feet sinking into mud that smelled of pine and rot. The pack elders formed a semicircle before me, their faces carved from stone, while behind them, the rest of the Moonvale pack watched with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. My childhood friends averted their eyes. My own family stood apart, my mother's fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. My father's jaw set in that familiar line that meant shame had found our doorstep once again. Luna Blackwood, Elder Miriam spoke, her voice carrying across the clearing despite the steady drum of rain. You have been rejected by your mate. The moon has witnessed. The earth has recorded. The pack acknowledges this severance. I didn't move. Couldn't. The hollow space beneath my ribs where my heart should be throbbed with each word. Rain mingled with the tears on my cheeks, and I was grateful for the disguise. 3 days ago, I had stood in this same circle wearing flowers in my hair, watching Ezra stride toward me, his golden eyes meeting mine with what I had foolishly believed was love. Now those same eyes wouldn't even look at me. He stood beside his new chosen one, Sarah, with her copper hair and perfect curves. His arm wrapped possessively around her waist. The mate bond that should have sealed between us during the full moon ceremony had never materialized. Instead, moments after our hands were bound with the sacred cord, he had doubled over, gasping, then turned to look at Sarah with an expression of wonder and hunger that had never once been directed at me. You are unmated, Elder Miriam continued, her voice softening just enough to betray a hint of compassion that made this somehow worse. And as the laws of our kind have stood for generations, an unmated wolf of breeding age cannot remain within pack boundaries. My grandmother's pendant burned against my skin, hidden beneath my dress. The small silver crescent moon on a leather cord was the only thing I had left of her. She had pressed it into my palm on her deathbed 7 years ago, whispering, "When the night is darkest, remember, the moon still watches over you, little wolf." I reached for it now, my fingers finding the familiar shape through the wet fabric. Luna Blackwood, you are cast out. You have until sunrise to gather your belongings and leave Moonvale territory. Thunder cracked overhead, as if the sky itself protested this sentence. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, nature mirroring my inner storm. I had known this was coming from the moment Ezra's eyes had found Sarah's, but hearing the words spoken aloud made them real in a way my mind had been fighting against. I understand, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My wolf, usually so present beneath my skin, had retreated deep inside, curled into herself in grief and confusion. Elder Miriam nodded once, then turned to address the pack. The rejection ceremony is complete. May the moon guide Luna Blackwood to her true path. They dispersed quickly, eager to escape the rain and the uncomfortable spectacle of my humiliation. No one approached me. No one offered shelter from the storm. I remained in the center of the circle until only 3 figures remained, my parents and Ezra. My mother took a hesitant step forward, her face crumpling. "Luna." "Don't," I whispered. "Please." She retreated, hand pressed to her mouth. My father's eyes met mine, filled with a complicated mixture of sorrow and resignation. He had been born an Omega in a pack that valued strength above all else. He knew what it meant to be considered lesser. His hand found my mother's shoulder, squeezing gently before guiding her away, leaving me alone with the man who had promised me forever, only to snatch it away before it even began. Ezra approached slowly, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He stopped several feet away, as if afraid to come closer, or perhaps afraid of what might happen if he did. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, the words falling between us like stones. I laughed, the sound raw and bitter. "No one ever does. Luna, you have to understand. This isn't something I chose, the mate bond. It's beyond our control. What I feel for Sarah, I don't need the details." I cut him off. "I was there, remember? I felt it too. The moment your wolf recognized hers. The moment mine was left howling into the void." He flinched. "Where will you go?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Where did unmated wolves go? The cities, mostly. where they tried to blend in among humans, denying their nature until it withered inside them. Some found other packs willing to take in strays, though those were rare and often came with conditions that made the protection hardly worth the cost. A few joined the lone wolves, nomads who traveled in small groups, owning nothing, belonging nowhere. "Does it matter to you?" I asked. His silence was answer enough. "Goodbye, Ezra," I said, turning away from him, from the life I'd expected to have, from the only home I'd ever known. I walked through the rain toward my parents' cabin to gather what few possessions I could carry. The path was slick with mud, and twice I nearly fell. My wolf stirred briefly, lending me balance when my human form faltered. At least she hadn't abandoned me completely. The cabin was quiet when I entered, my parents nowhere to be seen. A small mercy. I couldn't bear to watch my mother cry or see my father pretend that this wasn't breaking him too. I moved mechanically, pulling out my backpack, filling it with clothes, a few books, the handmade knife my father had given me on my 16th birthday, the small wooden wolf my mother had carved when I first shifted, practical things, sentimental things, things to remind me of who I was when the loneliness threatened to erase me. Night had fallen by the time I finished packing. The rain had slowed to a gentle patter against the roof. I changed into dry clothes, jeans, a thermal shirt, my sturdiest boots, and the leather jacket that had once belonged to my grandmother. I braided my long dark hair to keep it out of my face for the journey ahead. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and waited for dawn, for my sentence to officially begin. I must have dozed off because I woke with a start to the sound of something hitting my window. Disoriented, I peered through the glass to see a small pebble bounce off the pane, then another. I slid the window open and leaned out to find Nora, my childhood best friend, standing below, her face pale in the moonlight. "What are you doing here?" I hissed. "Come down," she whispered back. Quickly. Curiosity overrode caution. I grabbed my pack and slipped out of the house through the back door, making my way to where Nora waited at the edge of the trees. "You shouldn't be here," I said when I reached her. "Association with the pack reject isn't going to win you any favors." She rolled her eyes, so familiar and so Nora that my chest ached with the knowledge that this might be the last time I saw her. "I'm not here for favors. I'm here because you're my friend, and what happened to you is wrong." "It's pack law," I said, the words tasting like ash. "It's bullshit," she countered, "and you know it. Look, I can't change what happened, but I can give you this." She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "It's a map to the Grey Mountain Territory. My cousin joined their pack last year after her mate died. She says their alpha is fair, if a bit intense. They might take you in." Hope flickered briefly in my chest before I smothered it. "Why would they accept a rejected wolf?" "Because you're more than that," Nora said fiercely. "Because any pack would be lucky to have you. Because you're the only person I know who can track game better than hunters twice your age. Because your healing skills saved Ethan's life when he was gored by that boar last winter." She gripped my shoulders. "You have value, Luna. Don't let what happened make you forget that." I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. "Grey Mountain is at least a week's journey on foot. Then you'd better get started." She pulled me into a tight hug. "Be safe. And when you're settled, find a way to let me know you're okay." "I will," I promised, knowing it might be one I couldn't keep. We parted quickly after that, both aware that dawn was approaching. I headed east, toward the pack boundary, my backpack heavy with possessions but lighter than the burden of rejection I carried. As I walked, I unfolded Nora's map, studying it by moonlight. Grey Mountain Territory lay far to the north, beyond the neutral lands that separated the major pack territories. It would be a difficult journey, especially alone. The first rays of sunrise were just breaking over the horizon when I reached the stone markers that delineated Moonvale territory. I paused at the boundary, looking back at the only home I'd ever known. The forest was beautiful in the early morning light, mist rising between the trees, dew sparkling on spiderwebs strung between branches. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember what it had felt like to run through these woods in wolf form. The pack around me, the moon above, belonging completely to this place and these people. Then I turned away and stepped across the boundary, feeling something inside me tear as I did. My wolf whimpered, the sound echoing in the hollow spaces of my mind. I was now officially packless, mateless, alone. "We still have each other," I whispered to my wolf. She didn't respond. I walked until my boots raised blisters on my heels, and the sun had climbed high in the sky. The neutral lands were wild and largely uninhabited, the perfect place for a lone wolf to disappear. I knew these lands somewhat from hunting expeditions, but never this far from pack territory. Every step took me deeper into the unknown. By midday, I reached a small stream and stopped to refill my water bottle and rest. As I knelt by the water, a twig snapped in the forest behind me. I froze, scenting the air. Not human, not wolf either, at least not entirely. Something else. I rose slowly, turning to face whatever had followed me. The trees at the edge of the clearing shivered, and then a massive figure emerged from the shadows. A man. No, not just a man. A wolf in human form, but unlike any I'd ever encountered. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun, his face a study in harsh planes and angles. His eyes, when they fixed on me, were the color of Arctic ice, so pale they seemed to glow against his tanned skin. But it was his scent that made my wolf suddenly surge forward, pressing against the barrier between us and the world. Power. Ancient pine forests after rain. Blood and metal. Alpha. But not just any alpha. Something more primal, more dangerous. "Little wolf," he said, his voice like gravel, deep and rough. "You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" I repeated, taking an instinctive step back. My voice came out higher than I intended. "This is neutral territory." A smile curved his mouth, though it didn't reach those ice-pale eyes. "Is that what they told you in Moonvale?" The fact that he knew which pack I came from sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't mentioned it, and I'd been careful to wash away my scent at the stream. Either he'd been tracking me longer than I realized, or he knew far more about me than a stranger should. "These lands haven't been neutral for 3 winters," he continued, moving closer with the fluid grace of a predator. "Not since the Great Council redrew the territorial lines after the uprising." The uprising. The word hung in the air between us. 3 years ago, several smaller packs had rebelled against the Council's authority, resulting in the bloodiest conflict between werewolves in generations. Moonvale had remained neutral, closing its borders and refusing to take sides. Apparently, we'd also closed ourselves off from information about the changing world beyond our territory. "I didn't know," I admitted, seeing no point in lying. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant through my shirt, drawing strength from its familiar shape. "I left Moonvale at dawn. I was heading north. To Grey Mountain?" His eyes flicked to the folded map still clutched in my left hand. I nodded, unnerved by his perception. He laughed then, a sound like breaking ice. "Grey Mountain fell 6 months ago. Their alpha challenged the wrong wolf and lost." His gaze swept over me in a slow, assessing way that made my skin prickle. "Where is your pack, little wolf? Why do you travel alone?" The question reopened the wound that was still raw and bleeding. I lifted my chin, determined not to show weakness. "I have no pack." "Ah." Understanding dawned in those cold eyes. "Rejected by your mate." I flinched before I could stop myself. "How recently?" he asked, coming even closer. I held my ground through sheer force of will, though every instinct screamed at me to run. Not that running would help. No wolf in human form could outpace an alpha if he decided to give chase. "Yesterday," I answered, the word like ground glass in my throat. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or interest, and already so far from home? Most rejected wolves spend days howling at their pack's borders, begging to be let back in. "I'm not most wolves," I said, a spark of defiance flaring through the fear and uncertainty. His head tilted slightly, those unnerving eyes studying me with renewed intensity. "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not." For a long moment, we stood in silence, the forest unnaturally quiet around us. As if the wildlife held its breath in the presence of this apex predator, I became acutely aware of how vulnerable I was. Alone, packless, in territory I had wrongly believed was unclaimed, facing an alpha who could kill me with a casual swipe of his hand if he chose. "What will you do now, Luna Blackwood?" he asked, my name on his lips making me start. "How do you—" "Word travels," he interrupted, "even to those of us who prefer solitude, the rejected mate of Ezra Thornfield, the healer who saved a hunter from a boar's tusks, the tracker who can find game where others see only empty forest." Each detail of my life from his mouth made my skin crawl. How long had he been watching Moonvale? Watching me? "You haven't answered my question," he prompted. "What will you do now?" I straightened, squaring my shoulders. "Find somewhere I can belong." "Belong," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "A pack, you mean? A new family to replace the one that cast you out?" "Yes." He moved then, circling me slowly, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. "And if there was no pack that would take you? If the only options left to you were to fade into the human world, denying your true nature until it withered within you, or to wander as a lone wolf until hunters or rival packs ended your solitary existence?" The bleak future he painted was one I'd been trying not to contemplate since Elder Miriam had pronounced my sentence. Hearing it spoken aloud made it suddenly, terrifyingly real. "There's always another choice," I said, though I couldn't imagine what it might be. He stopped his circling directly in front of me, so close now that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "Yes," he agreed. "There is." My wolf stirred restlessly beneath my skin, pressing forward as if trying to get closer to this dangerous stranger. Confused by her reaction, I took a deliberate step back. "These lands," he said, gesturing to the forest around us, "are Blackclaw territory now." My territory. The name sent another chill through me. Blackclaw. Even sheltered Moonvale had heard whispers of the Blackclaw pack, fierce warriors, ruthless in battle, led by an alpha so cold and merciless he was said to have torn out his own heart to become invulnerable. A pack that took no prisoners and showed no mercy to trespassers. "You're the heartless alpha," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "That's what they call me, yes." "Are you going to kill me for trespassing?" I asked, proud that my voice remained steady despite the fear coursing through me. His lips curved in that same mirthless smile. "If I wanted you dead, little wolf, you wouldn't still be breathing." "Then what do you want?" He was silent for a long moment, those pale eyes never leaving mine. When he finally spoke, his words were the last thing I expected. "I want you to join my pack." I blinked, certain I had misheard him. "What?" "You heard me." He crossed his arms over his massive chest. "I'm offering you a place in Blackclaw." "Why?" I demanded, suspicion immediately replacing shock. No alpha, especially not one with Blackclaw's reputation, would offer a home to a rejected wolf out of kindness. "What's the catch?" "Smart girl," he murmured, approval evident in his tone. "The catch, as you put it, is that you would be mine." "Yours?" I repeated, my mind racing to understand what he meant. "As what? A servant? A slave?" His laugh was sharp and sudden. "As my mate." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "That's not possible," I said automatically. "You can't just choose a mate. The bond either forms or it doesn't. Mine didn't, with anyone." The admission scraped my throat raw. "In most cases, yes," he agreed. "But there are older ways. Stronger magic than what your soft pack practices with its flower ceremonies and sacred chords." His gaze dropped to where my hand still clutched my grandmother's pendant. "The old wolves knew that sometimes fate needs assistance." "You're talking about forced bonding," I said, horrified. "That's forbidden by the council. It's an abomination." "Is it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Or is it simply another path? One that your elders, in their fear of anything that challenges their comfortable traditions, have taught you to revile without understanding?" I shook my head, taking another step back. "Even if what you're suggesting wasn't wrong on every level, why me? You could have any wolf you wanted. Why choose a reject?" Something shifted in his expression, a brief glimpse of emotion quickly masked. "Perhaps I see something in you that your former mate was too blind to recognize." "You don't know me," I insisted. I know enough. He took a step toward me, closing the distance I had created. I know you didn't break when your world shattered around you. I know you walked away with your head high, instead of begging to be allowed to stay. I know you headed north alone rather than east to the cities where most rejected wolves flee. His voice dropped lower. I know your wolf responded to mine just now, even though you're trying very hard to pretend she didn't. Heat flooded my cheeks because he was right. My wolf, who had been so subdued since the rejection, had practically lunged toward this stranger. Even now, she paced restlessly beneath my skin, drawn to his power in a way I couldn't understand and didn't welcome. Join me or don't, he said, his tone suddenly dismissive. The choice is yours, but know this. These lands are no longer neutral, and the path to Grey Mountain no longer leads to sanctuary. The forest grows dangerous after dark, and not all predators are as conversational as I am. The threat was clear, though elegantly delivered. He turned as if to leave, and panic flared through me at the thought of being left alone again, packless and directionless in increasingly hostile territory. Wait, I called. He paused, looking back over his shoulder with those unnerving eyes. You haven't even told me your name, I said. For the first time, a genuine smile curved his lips, transforming his harsh features into something almost handsome. Alaric, he said. Alaric Blackclaw. And if I were to accept your offer, I pressed, still not entirely believing this wasn't some elaborate trick, what would life in Blackclaw be like for your mate? He turned to face me fully again. You would want for nothing. You would be protected, respected, feared. No one would dare reject you or cast you out ever again, and in return, loyalty, he said simply, obedience when necessary, and his eyes darkened. Eventually heirs. The implication sent a shock of heat through me that I refused to acknowledge. How do I know I can trust you? Your reputation is exactly that, reputation. Stories told by enemies and rivals, embellished with each retelling until the man becomes a monster. He stepped closer again, and this time I held my ground. I'm offering you a choice, Luna Blackwood. More than your own pack gave you. Accept or decline. Either way, you'll need to leave my territory by nightfall. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon. I had perhaps 4 hours before darkness fell. Not enough time to reach any kind of safety, especially in unfamiliar territory. How far is your pack from here? I asked. Half a day's journey. We would reach it by dawn if we left now. I hesitated, weighing impossible options. Return to Moonvale and beg for mercy that wouldn't come. Continue north to a pack that no longer existed. Head east to the cities and a half-life among humans. Or follow this dangerous alpha into what might be a trap, but might also be the only chance I had at belonging somewhere again. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. When the night is darkest, remember, the moon still watches over you, little wolf. I touched the pendant again, drawing strength from it. If I go with you, I said carefully, I'm not agreeing to be your mate, not yet. I need time to know you, to know your pack. Alaric studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. Conditional acceptance. I can work with that. And if I decide against it later, then I will personally escort you to the edge of Blackclaw territory and point you toward the nearest human settlement. He held out his hand. Do we have an agreement, Luna Blackwood? I looked at his outstretched hand, knowing that once I took it, there would be no turning back. My old life was already gone, shattered the moment Ezra's eyes had found Sarah's instead of mine. Whatever lay ahead couldn't possibly be worse than the hollowness that had taken up residence inside me since that moment. I placed my hand in his skin burning hot against mine. We have an agreement, Alaric Blackclaw. His fingers closed around mine, and something electric passed between us, making my wolf surge forward again. This time I didn't fight her reaction. Good, he said softly. Now we run. Run? I echoed, glancing down at my very human form, still clothed in jeans and my leather jacket. Like this? Alaric's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. Unless you prefer to shift, though I'll warn you. My wolves aren't particularly modest about nudity. Heat flooded my cheeks. In Moonvale, shifting was a private affair. We undressed in specially designated areas, shifted, and then emerged in wolf form. Returning to human shape followed the same protocol in reverse. The thought of stripping down in front of this intimidating stranger made my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Human form is fine," I said quickly. His lips twitched. "As you wish, though you'll find it harder to keep pace." "I'll manage." He nodded once, then turned and began to lope through the forest with that same fluid grace I'd noticed earlier. I adjusted my backpack and followed, immediately understanding his warning. Even in human form, he moved with preternatural speed, forcing me to break into a jog just to keep him in sight. The forest grew denser as we traveled, the trees older and more tightly packed. Shadows deepened as the sun continued its westward journey. Alaric navigated the undergrowth effortlessly, never breaking stride, while I stumbled over exposed roots and ducked beneath low-hanging branches. After an hour of this punishing pace, my lungs burned and my legs trembled with exhaustion. "Wait!" I gasped, bending over to brace my hands on my knees. "I need a moment." To my surprise, he stopped immediately, turning back to assess me with those pale eyes. "We're being followed," he said quietly. My head snapped up. "What? By whom?" "Rogues. 3 of them. They've been tracking us for the past 20 minutes. I straightened, suddenly alert, my fatigue forgotten. Rogues were wolves who had been expelled from their packs for criminal behavior. Theft, murder, worse. They traveled in small groups, preying on weaker wolves and humans alike. In Moonvale, mothers frightened misbehaving children with tales of rogues who stole pups in the night. "Why didn't you say something?" I hissed. "Because I didn't want you to panic." His nostrils flared as he scented the air. "They're getting closer. We need to move faster." "I can't," I admitted, hating the weakness. "Not like this." He considered me for a moment, then nodded decisively, then shift. "Here?" I glanced around at the darkening forest. "Now, unless you'd prefer to be rogue meat." His tone was matter-of-fact, devoid of mockery. I swallowed hard, knowing he was right. In wolf form, I'd be faster, stronger, better able to defend myself if it came to that, but the thought of undressing in front of him. "Turn around," I said. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Then he deliberately turned his back to me. "Hurry," he said over his shoulder. "They're less than a mile behind us now." My fingers fumbled with the zipper of my jacket, my heart hammering against my ribs. I shrugged it off, then pulled my thermal shirt over my head, shivering as the cool air hit my bare skin. The boots came next, then jeans, until I stood in nothing but my underwear, trembling partly from cold and partly from the knowledge of how exposed I was. "How do I carry my things?" I asked, my voice smaller than I would have liked. Without turning, Alaric shrugged out of his own jacket and tossed it backward toward me. A leather pack was attached to the back, specially designed to be carried by a wolf. "Put everything in there. I'll carry it." I stuffed my clothes and boots into the pack, keeping only my grandmother's pendant, which I looped around my neck. It would adjust to my wolf form, as it always had. "Ready?" I said. He turned, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, electric moment, before dropping to take in my nearly naked form. Heat bloomed across my skin, but I refused to cover myself. I wasn't ashamed of my body, even if Moonvale's modesty protocols had been ingrained in me since childhood. Alaric's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in those ice-pale eyes. "Shift," he said, his voice rougher than before. "I'll wait." I nodded, then closed my eyes, reaching for that place inside where my wolf waited. The shift came easier than I expected, perhaps because my wolf was so eager for it. Bones cracked and reformed, muscle and sinew rearranging themselves, fur sprouting from skin. The pain was familiar, almost welcome after the emotional agony of the past few days. When I opened my eyes again, the world had transformed. Colors faded, but scents and sounds intensified. I could hear the rogues now, their heavy breathing as they loped through the forest. Still distant but closing in, I could smell Alaric's power. Stronger now to my wolf's senses, a heady mixture of dominance and something else. Something that made my wolf want to press closer to him. I looked up to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. My wolf form was smaller than most, sleek and dark with unusual silver markings along my spine and a white crescent moon shape on my chest directly above where the pendant rested. "Beautiful," he murmured, so quietly I almost missed it. Then he began to undress, his movements efficient and completely unself-conscious. I averted my eyes, a ridiculous gesture given that I was now a wolf, but old habits died hard. When I looked back, a massive black wolf stood where Alaric had been, easily twice my size, with eyes that remained that same unsettling pale blue. The pack containing our clothes was secured around his middle with straps that seemed designed for this purpose. He nudged my shoulder with his muzzle, then took off into the forest at a run. I followed, reveling in the freedom of movement after hours in human form. My wolf was ecstatic to be released, bounding through the undergrowth with joy despite the danger behind us. This was what I had missed most in the days since the rejection, the simple pleasure of running as a wolf, feeling the earth beneath my paws, the wind in my fur. We ran for what felt like hours, the forest changing around us as we moved deeper into Black Claw territory. The trees grew even older here, their massive trunks wider than 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder, their canopies so dense that little undergrowth survived in the perpetual twilight beneath. The ground rose steadily, and I realized we were climbing into the foothills of the mountain range that formed the northern border of what I had always known as the neutral lands. Alaric set a punishing pace, but my wolf rose to the challenge, keeping up even when my human mind worried we would collapse from exhaustion. Periodically, he would stop, scenting the air, then adjust our course slightly. The rogues remained behind us, but they weren't gaining ground. Just when I thought I couldn't run another step, the forest opened up into a vast clearing dominated by an enormous stone structure. It rose from the earth like a natural formation, all rough-hewn granite and timber, with multiple levels built into the hillside. Firelight glowed from numerous windows, and figures moved in the shadows around it. Alaric paused at the edge of the trees, waiting for me to catch up. When I reached his side, panting, he touched his nose briefly to my ear in what felt like a reassuring gesture. Then he threw back his head and howled, a long, commanding sound that echoed off the surrounding hills. Answering howls rose from the structure and the surrounding forest, dozens of voices joining in a chorus that made my fur stand on end. This was no ordinary pack greeting. This was a call to arms. Alaric nudged me forward, and we broke from the cover of the trees just as wolves began pouring from the structure, racing toward us with deadly purpose. My heart stuttered with fear, but Alaric remained calm beside me, his posture relaxed even as the first wave of defenders reached us. They circled us, growling low in their throats, massive wolves in various shades of gray and brown and black. None approached too closely, maintaining a respectful distance from their alpha, but their eyes fixed on me with suspicious hostility. A large gray wolf with a jagged scar running down his left flank stepped forward, his amber eyes moving from Alaric to me and back again. Some silent communication seemed to pass between him and Alaric, and then the gray wolf barked once, sharp and commanding. Half the gathered wolves immediately broke away, racing past us toward the forest, toward the rogue still pursuing us. The rest formed a protective circle around Alaric and me, escorting us toward the stone structure that I now understood was the Black Claw pack house. As we approached, wolves began shifting back to human form, unconcerned with their nudity. Men and women of various ages moved with purpose, some disappearing into the pack house, others taking up positions along the perimeter of the clearing. Several carried weapons, not guns, but traditional arms, spears, bows, wicked-looking knives. Alaric led me to a secluded alcove near the main entrance of the pack house, then shifted back to human form in one fluid motion. I averted my eyes again, only to hear him chuckle. "You'll need to get past that shyness if you're going to survive here," he said, his voice amused. "Shift back, Luna. I need to introduce you properly, and that's difficult when you can't speak." Reluctantly, I let the change take me, bones cracking and reforming until I stood human again, acutely aware of my near-nakedness. Alaric was already dressed, having retrieved our clothes from the pack he'd carried. He handed me my things without looking at me, giving me a moment of privacy to dress. Once clothed, I felt marginally better, though still painfully exposed as Alaric led me into the pack house. Inside was a maze of stone corridors and wooden beams, the walls adorned with pelts and weapons, the air heavy with the scents of wood smoke, cooking meat, and wolf. Dozens of eyes followed our progress, curious and wary. We emerged into a great hall dominated by a massive fire pit in the center, flames leaping toward a smoke hole in the high ceiling. Around the fire, rough-hewn wooden tables and benches formed a semicircle, and on a raised platform at the far end stood a throne-like chair carved from a single massive piece of dark wood. The gray wolf I'd seen earlier entered behind us, now in human form, a tall, heavily muscled man with the same jagged scar visible on his human face. He approached Alaric with the easy confidence of someone secure in their position. "The rogues are being dealt with," he said without preamble. "They won't trouble us again." Alaric nodded. "Good. Lucas, this is Luna Blackwood, formerly of Moonvale. Luna, this is Lucas, my beta." Lucas's amber eyes studied me with open curiosity. "The rejected mate," he said, not unkindly. "Word traveled fast after your ceremony." I stiffened. News of my humiliation makes for interesting gossip, I suppose. News of a strong wolf being cast out makes for strategic opportunity, Lucas corrected, glancing at Alaric. Though I didn't expect you to act on it quite so directly, Alaric's expression remained impassive. "Gather the pack. I want to make the introduction formal." Lucas nodded, then moved away, barking orders to those nearby. Within minutes, wolves began streaming into the great hall in both human and wolf form, taking positions around the fire pit or along the walls. The energy in the room shifted, becoming charged with anticipation. "What's happening?" I whispered to Alaric as he led me toward the raised platform. "I'm introducing you as my chosen," he replied quietly. "It will establish your position and ensure your safety while you consider my offer." My heart began to race. I thought we agreed I wasn't accepting that part of the deal yet. "We did," he assured me. "But they don't need to know that. A packless wolf would be vulnerable here. My chosen is untouchable." Before I could respond, we reached the platform. Alaric stepped up onto it, then extended his hand to help me up beside him. I took it, feeling that same electric jolt when our skin connected. Behind us loomed the massive wooden throne, and before us, the entire Blackclaw pack waited, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. "Blackclaw," Alaric's voice rang out, deep and commanding. "I've brought someone into our territory. Luna Blackwood, formerly of Moonvale." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I caught fragments. "Rejected mate. Cast out. Alpha's chosen?" "Some of you have already heard of her," Alaric continued. "Moonvale's loss is our gain. Luna is a skilled healer and tracker, and she is under my protection." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining in a possessive gesture that sent a shiver down my spine. "Any who threaten her, threaten me. Is that understood?" Nods and murmurs of assent rippled through the gathered wolves, though I noticed not all seemed pleased by this announcement. A striking blonde woman near the front watched me with undisguised hostility. Her green eyes narrowed to slits. "Good," Alaric said. "Lucas will organize hunting parties to patrol our borders. The rest of you return to your duties." The crowd began to disperse, though many continued to cast curious glances in my direction. Alaric's hand remained firmly around mine, a clear message to anyone watching. "Who is she?" I asked quietly, nodding toward the blonde woman who continued to glare at me even as others moved away. Alaric followed my gaze. "Sylvia. She's been pursuing me for some time, and you brought me here as your chosen without warning her first?" I hissed. "Are you trying to get me killed in my sleep?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You won't be sleeping anywhere she can reach you." Before I could ask what he meant by that, Lucas approached the platform again. "The rogues have been dealt with," he reported. 3 males from the Shadow Ridge pack expelled last moon for challenging their alpha. They won't trouble anyone again. The casual way he delivered this information, and what it implied, sent a chill through me. Moonvale had been peaceful for generations, disputes settled through negotiation rather than violence. I was beginning to understand that Blackclaw operated by very different rules. "Show Luna to my quarters," Alaric instructed Lucas. "She'll need to rest after her journey. I'll join you shortly." "Your quarters?" I repeated, alarm flaring through me. That wasn't part of our agreement. My quarters are the only ones guaranteed to be safe for you, Alaric replied, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Until the pack accepts you, there will be those who might test my resolve by harming you, like Sylvia, I murmured, among others. His ice blue eyes held mine. I won't touch you, Luna. You have my word. But I will keep you safe, even if that means protecting you from my own pack. I wanted to argue, to insist on separate accommodations, but the events of the day were catching up to me. Exhaustion pulled at my limbs, and the thought of having to remain alert for potential threats was more than I could bear. Fine, I conceded, but this is temporary, until I decide whether to stay or go. Of course. That ghost of a smile returned. Until you decide. But something in his tone suggested he already knew what my decision would be, as if the outcome had been determined the moment I placed my hand in his at the stream. As if all paths now led to one inevitable destination, and I was merely delaying the journey. Lucas led me through a maze of stone corridors, deeper into the heart of the pack house. We climbed stairs carved directly into the rock, ascending to what must have been the highest level of the structure. The few wolves we passed on our journey watched me with undisguised curiosity, some nodding respectfully, others maintaining a careful distance. News of my status as the Alpha's chosen had clearly spread quickly. Has he ever brought anyone here before? I asked Lucas, as we reached a heavy wooden door at the end of a torchlit hallway. The beta glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. Not like this, he said after a moment. Alaric has always kept to himself. Then why me? The question had been haunting me since our encounter in the forest. Why bring a rejected wolf into your pack as his chosen? Lucas paused, his hand on the door latch. That's for him to explain, he said finally. But know this, Alaric doesn't act without purpose. Whatever his reasons, they'll be good ones. He pushed open the door, revealing a spacious chamber beyond. These are the Alpha's quarters. Make yourself comfortable. Food will be brought up shortly. With that, he departed, leaving me alone in Alaric's private domain. I stepped inside hesitantly, taking in my surroundings. The room was surprisingly austere for an Alpha's quarters. A large bed dominated one wall, covered in furs rather than conventional bedding. A stone fireplace occupied another wall, a small fire already burning in the grate. A desk and chair stood beneath a window that overlooked the clearing and the forest beyond. A few weapons hung on the walls. An ornate bow, a wicked-looking sword, a pair of matching daggers. What struck me most was the absence of personal items. No photographs, no trinkets, nothing to indicate the personality of the man who slept here. The heartless Alpha, indeed. I moved to the window, watching as wolves in both human and wolf form moved about the clearing below. The pack was larger than I'd realized, at least 60 wolves from what I could see. A hunting party returned from the forest, dragging the carcass of a large buck. Children, pups, we called them in Moonvale, played a game of chase near the edge of the trees, their laughter floating up to my window. It looked so normal, so much like the life I'd lost, that a lump formed in my throat. I turned away from the window, unwilling to torment myself with visions of a belonging I might never reclaim. A soft knock at the door interrupted my melancholy. "Come in," I called, expecting food as Lucas had promised. Instead, a young woman entered, perhaps a few years younger than me, carrying a bundle of cloth. Her dark hair was braided back from her face, revealing gentle brown eyes that widened when they met mine. "You're really her," she breathed. "The one he brought back." I shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "I'm Luna," I said simply. She bobbed her head in a quick nod. "Mira, I'm one of the pack healers. I brought you clean clothes." She held out the bundle. "And I'm supposed to show you to the bathing chamber, if you'd like to wash away the journey." The thought of a bath was suddenly the most appealing thing I could imagine. I accepted the bundle with a grateful smile. "Thank you. I'd like that very much." Mira led me to an adjoining chamber I hadn't noticed, where a large stone tub was set into the floor. Steam rose from water that smelled faintly of pine and something sweeter. Lavender, perhaps. She showed me where soap and drying cloths were kept, then hesitated at the door. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That you're to be his mate? I considered how to answer. Nothing is decided yet, I said carefully. Her eyes widened further. But he announced you as his chosen. No one questions the Alpha's choice. I do, I said, with more conviction than I felt. I've just lost everything, Mira. My pack, my place, the future I thought I would have. I'm not rushing into anything new until I'm sure it's right. She looked shocked. Then something like admiration flickered across her face. You're brave, she said. Or foolish. Perhaps both. Perhaps, I agreed with a small smile. Thank you for the clothes and the bath. After she left, I sank into the steaming water with a sigh of pure pleasure. The heat worked its way into muscles sore from running, easing tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. I scrubbed away the dirt and sweat of the journey, along with the last lingering sense of Moonvale. When I emerged from the water and dried myself, I felt renewed, as if I'd shed an old skin. The clothes Mira had brought fit surprisingly well. Soft leggings in a deep green and a loose cream-colored tunic that laced at the neck. I braided my damp hair, then returned to the main chamber to find a tray of food waiting on a small table near the fire. Roasted meat, bread, cheese, and what smelled like mulled wine. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since dawn. I sat and consumed everything, the simple meal tasting better than any feast I could remember. As I finished the last of the wine, the door opened, and Alaric entered. He'd changed clothes as well, now wearing dark trousers and a gray shirt that strained slightly across his broad shoulders. His hair was damp, suggesting he too had bathed somewhere in the vast pack house. He paused when he saw me, those ice-pale eyes taking in my appearance with an intensity that made heat rise to my cheeks. The clothes suit you, he said, moving to pour himself a cup of wine from a decanter on his desk. How are you finding your accommodations? Nicer than sleeping in the forest with rogues hunting me, I replied, earning a brief smile from him. A low bar to clear, he took a seat in the chair opposite mine, his large frame making the furniture seem smaller. But I'll take it as a compliment nonetheless. A silence fell between us, not entirely uncomfortable, but charged with unasked questions. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant, drawing comfort from its familiar shape through the fabric of my tunic. You touch that often, Alaric observed. What is it? I hesitated, then pulled the pendant out, letting it rest against the cream fabric. My grandmother's. She gave it to me before she died. He leaned forward slightly, studying the silver crescent, a moon. He said softly, fitting for a wolf named Luna. She always said I was named for the moon, not the other way around. The memory brought a sad smile to my lips. She said I was born during a lunar eclipse, and that it marked me for something special. Was she a healer too? I nodded. The best Moonvale had ever known, according to my father. She taught me everything. Which herbs to use for fever, how to set a broken bone, how to ease the pain of a difficult shift. I tucked the pendant back beneath my tunic. She would have been ashamed to see me cast out. No, Alaric said with surprising gentleness. She would have been ashamed of a pack that failed to recognize your worth. The unexpected kindness in his voice made my throat tighten. I looked away, unwilling to let him see how deeply his words affected me. Why did you really bring me here, Alaric? I asked, returning to the question that had plagued me since our meeting in the forest. The truth this time. He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd yet heard it. Blackclaw has no healer, he said. We lost ours in the last battle of the uprising. We've managed with basic knowledge, but... He glanced toward the window, toward his pack below. We've lost wolves we shouldn't have, pups who might have lived with proper care. Wounds that festered when they should have healed. So I'm here to be your pack healer? I clarified, oddly disappointed. That's all? His gaze returned to mine, sharp and assessing. Would that be so terrible? To have purpose again? To be valued for your skills rather than your ability to bond with a mate who was too blind to recognize what stood before him? The accuracy of his words stung. And the mate part of your offer? Was that just... what? A bonus? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I never offer anything I don't mean, Luna. But why? I pressed. You could have simply offered me a place as healer. Why complicate it with talk of mates and bonds? Alaric set down his wine cup with deliberate care. Because a healer can be replaced, a mate cannot. I don't understand. He rose from his chair and moved to the window, his back to me as he looked out at his territory. What do you know of my reputation, Luna? What tales did Moonvale tell of the heartless Alpha? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. They said you tore out your own heart to become invulnerable in battle. That you feel nothing. No pain, no compassion, no love. That your pack follows you out of fear rather than loyalty. A harsh laugh escaped him, colorful, and not entirely inaccurate. He turned back to face me, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in those ice-pale eyes. 6 years ago, I had a mate, Ilara. She was everything to me, my heart, my conscience, my reason for leading rather than simply dominating. When the uprising began, I wanted to remain neutral, as your Moonvale did. Ilara convinced me we had a duty to stand with the council, to uphold the old ways. I held my breath, sensing where this story was heading. We were ambushed, he continued, his voice flat. Betrayed by wolves we thought were allies. I was separated from Ilara in the fighting. By the time I reached her, his jaw tightened. They had taken their time with her, made her suffer before killing her. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words painfully inadequate. I hunted down every wolf responsible, he said, as if I hadn't spoken. Slowly, one by one, I became the monster they now tell stories about. And when it was done, when the last of them had paid, I discovered something. What? I asked, though I feared the answer. That the emptiness remained. His eyes met mine, stark with an old pain that had never healed. That's what they sense, you know, the other wolves. The void where my heart used to be. It's why they call me heartless. Not because I ripped it out, but because it died with her. I rose from my chair, drawn to him despite myself. Then why seek another mate, if you loved her so much? Because the pack needs an alpha who is whole, he interrupted. Because I've watched them fear me when they should trust me. Because pups flinch when I approach, and mothers draw them close, as if I might devour my own kind. His voice dropped lower. Because 6 years is long enough to live as half a wolf. But you can't just choose a mate, I insisted. The bond can be created through ritual and will, he said. The old ways knew this. When packs were smaller, when survival depended on strong leadership, alphas would sometimes choose mates based on what the pack needed rather than what their wolves wanted. That sounds barbaric, I said, though with less conviction than before. It was practical, he countered. And often, the chosen mates grew to love each other over time. The bond may begin through ritual, but it becomes real, Luna, as real as any fated connection. I shook my head, trying to process everything he was telling me. So you chose me because I'm a healer? Because your pack needs my skills? I chose you because when I caught your scent on the wind, my wolf responded for the first time in 6 years, he said simply. I chose you because you walked away from rejection with your head high, showing more strength than wolves twice your age. I chose you because you need a pack as much as mine needs a healer. His gaze intensified. And because when our eyes met, something inside me that I thought long dead stirred back to life. My heart stuttered in my chest. My wolf, who had been quietly observing until now, suddenly pressed forward, yearning toward him with an intensity that startled me. You don't know me, I said again, echoing my words from the forest, but with less certainty now. I know enough to recognize a kindred spirit, he replied. Someone else who understands what it means to lose everything that matters. Someone who might possibly understand me. The vulnerability in his admission took my breath away. This was not the cold, merciless alpha of legend. This was a man who had suffered, who had allowed pain to transform him, who now reached out across the void of his loss toward something that might bring him back to life. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in my mind, "When the night is darkest, remember, the moon still watches over you, little wolf." I touched the pendant through my tunic, drawing strength from it as I had so many times before. I need time, I said finally, to know your pack, to know you. I won't be rushed into a bond, ritual or otherwise. Alaric nodded, something like relief flickering across his features. Time you shall have. And in return? In return, I'll be your healer, I decided. I'll tend to your wounded, deliver your pups, teach others what I know, and I'll consider the rest. A genuine smile transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and making him suddenly, startlingly handsome. That's all I ask. For now. The tension between us shifted, becoming something else, something warmer and more complicated. My wolf paced beneath my skin, eager and hopeful in a way she hadn't been since before the rejection. A commotion outside broke the moment. Shouts and growls rose from the clearing below, followed by a howl that made Alaric stiffen, his expression hardening back into the alpha mask I was beginning to recognize. Stay here, he ordered, moving swiftly to the door. What is it? I asked, following despite his command. He paused, glancing back at me with irritation that didn't quite mask his concern. Trouble. The kind I'd prefer you not to face on your first night here. If someone's hurt, they'll need a healer, I pointed out. Indecision flickered across his face, then he nodded curtly. Stay behind me. Speak to no one unless I indicate it's safe. We descended through the pack house quickly, emerging into the clearing where a crowd had gathered. The wolves parted instantly for their alpha, creating a path to the center where Lucas stood confronting 3 wolves I didn't recognize. They wore the colors of another pack, dark blue and silver, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and defiance. What is the meaning of this? Alaric demanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Lucas turned, the scar on his face stark in the firelight. Visitors from Moonvale, Alpha. They claim they've come for Luna. My heart lurched painfully in my chest as one of the Moonvale wolves stepped forward, Nora's brother, Elias, whom I'd known since childhood. His eyes found mine over Alaric's shoulder, widening in recognition. Luna, he said, relief evident in his voice. Thank the moon. We've been tracking you since dawn. Why? I asked, stepping out from behind Alaric despite his warning growl. To bring you back, Elias said, as if it were obvious. The council has reconsidered. You're being offered a place in the pack again. Murmurs rippled through the gathered Blackclaw wolves. I felt rather than saw Alaric tense beside me, his energy shifting to something dangerous. Why would they reconsider? I asked, suspicion replacing surprise. What's changed since yesterday when they cast me out? Elias hesitated, glancing at his companions. There's been a development. Ezra rejected Sarah, one of the other Moonvale wolves blurted out. The bond failed again. The elders think there might be something wrong with the ritual itself, not with you. They want you back to try to understand what's happening. Understanding dawned, cold and clarifying. They don't want me, I said slowly. They want to study me, to figure out why the bond isn't working. Elias had the grace to look uncomfortable. Luna, please. It's a chance to come home. Home? I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Where I was rejected and humiliated. Where I was cast out like garbage to face rogues and worse alone. That's not home, Elias. That's just the place I used to live. The council has authorized me to offer you a formal apology, Elias pressed, and a position as junior healer under Elder Miriam. You wouldn't be cast out again, no matter what happens with the mate bond. I felt Alaric's gaze on me, heavy with unasked questions. The entire clearing had gone silent, both packs watching to see what I would choose. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant, tracing its familiar shape through the fabric of my tunic. I thought of Moonvale, of its familiar forests and streams, of the cabin where I'd grown up, of my parents who hadn't fought to keep me. I thought of Ezra and his easy betrayal, of the elders who had cast me out without a second thought, only to want me back when I might be useful to them. Then I thought of Alaric, of his unexpected vulnerability, of his pack that needed a healer, of the chance to build something new from the ashes of what I'd lost. I thought of his words. I chose you because when our eyes met, something inside me that I thought long dead stirred back to life. My wolf, who had been so wounded by rejection, now stood tall within me, her decision already made. I turned to Alaric, meeting those ice-pale eyes directly. "I made a promise to you," I said clearly, loud enough for all to hear. "I intend to keep it." Something fierce and possessive flared in his gaze. He stepped closer, his hand finding mine in a gesture that left no doubt about my choice. "Luna has found a new pack," he told the Moonvale wolves, his voice carrying across the clearing. "She has been claimed by Blackclaw. By me." Elias looked stricken. "Luna, think about what you're doing." "Your parents should have stood for me when it mattered," I interrupted. "Tell them I'm well. Tell them I've found somewhere I'm valued for who I am, not what I can give." I squeezed Alaric's hand. "Tell them I've found where I belong." The Moonvale wolves exchanged glances, clearly at a loss. Finally, Elias nodded stiffly. "I'll convey your message. The council won't be pleased." "Their pleasure is no longer my concern," I replied, surprised by how little I cared about the elders' approval now. Lucas stepped forward. "I'll escort them back to the border," he told Alaric. "Make sure they leave our territory without incident." Alaric nodded his agreement, and the Moonvale delegation was led away, Elias casting one last troubled glance over his shoulder at me. The clearing began to empty as wolves returned to their tasks, though many looked at me with new interest, perhaps even respect. When we were relatively alone again, Alaric turned to face me fully. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once word spreads that you've chosen Blackclaw over Moonvale, there's no going back." "I've never been more certain of anything," I said, and found it was true. "They didn't want me, Alaric. They wanted to use me, to study what went wrong. You—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "You see something in me worth wanting for itself." The mask of the Alpha slipped, revealing the man beneath. His free hand rose to touch my cheek, his fingers warm against my skin. "I see everything in you," he said softly. "The strength you don't yet recognize. The healer who will save my pack. The woman who might, someday, save me." My wolf surged forward at his touch, yearning toward him with an intensity that took my breath away. For the first time since Ezra's rejection, I felt whole again, as if a piece of myself that had been torn away had been returned, different, but somehow right. "The ritual," I said, "the one you mentioned, for creating a mate bond through will rather than fate. What does it involve?" Surprise flickered across his face. "You're considering it already?" "I'm asking," I clarified. "Knowledge isn't commitment." A small smile curved his lips. "It's an ancient ceremony, performed under the full moon. Blood is shared, vows are spoken, the packs bear witness. But the core of it is simpler, two wolves choosing each other, day after day, moon after moon, until the choice becomes as natural as breathing." "And if it doesn't work?" I had to ask. "If we go through with it and no bond forms?" "Then I keep my promise," he said without hesitation. "You remain as our healer, respected and protected, for as long as you wish to stay, and I continue as I have been, half a wolf, leading as best I can." The honesty in his answer moved me more than any flowery promise could have. This was a man who had known devastating loss, who had rebuilt himself from its ashes, who now offered me not fairy tales but truth, however stark. My grandmother's words echoed once more in my mind. "When the night is darkest, remember, the moon still watches over you, little wolf." I touched the pendant, feeling its familiar weight against my skin. "The next full moon is in 2 weeks," I said. "I'll give you my answer then." Alaric nodded, acceptance in his eyes. 2 weeks, he agreed. Time enough to know your mind. But as his hand found mine again, as my wolf pressed eagerly toward his, as something electric and undeniable sparked between us, I suspected we both already knew what my answer would be. The moon had witnessed, the earth had recorded, and something that had been broken in both of us had found its first fragile path